Now let's talk about vitamin D dosages, how they relate to vitamin D status, and why it's important to understand the difference between recommended dosages and optimal dosages. Vitamin D amounts are most often expressed in international units, also known as IU, though sometimes they're referred to in milligrams or micrograms. 1 milligram of vitamin D3 is equal to 40,000 IU, so 1 microgram equals 40 IU, and 1 IU equals 0.025 micrograms. So then 1,000 IU is 25 micrograms, and 5,000 IU is 125 micrograms. The National Academy of Medicine, also known as NAM, is a nonprofit, non-government organization established in 1970. Since NAM's inception, the Institute of Medicine, also known as IOM, was part of the organization and was responsible for publishing nutrient requirement guides on more than 40 nutritional substances. These guides were known as the Recommended Dietary Allowance, or RDA. In the mid-1990s, however, the RDA was replaced with a new standard known as the Dietary Reference Intakes, or DRI. The DRI, which is specified on the basis of age, gender, and life stage, is a set of reference values consisting of the RDA plus 3 additional reference values: the estimated average requirement, also known as the EAR, the adequate intake, also known as the AI, and the tolerable upper intake level, also known as the UL. For the sake of completeness, it's worth noting that the FDA also has developed its own metric called daily value, also known as DV. Labels for dietary supplements are required to show a supplement facts table, which specifies the amount of each ingredient they contain as well as the percent of DV each amount represents. We'll discuss the DV in greater detail in a moment, but for now, let's get back to discussing the DRIs. The EAR is supposed to represent an intake amount that will meet the needs of about 50% of the population. This is a measured data point based on the assumption that a 20 serum level of 25-OHD provides vitamin D sufficiency. This is a very questionable assumption, but more on that later. The RDA is supposed to represent a level that will meet the requirements of 97.5% of the population. It's not actually measured. Rather, it's a derived statistical extrapolation of the EAR. More specifically, it's equal to 2 standard deviations above the EAR. The AI is supposed to represent the level needed to ensure nutritional adequacy and was originally established to be used just as a guide in cases when evidence was lacking to derive an actual RDA. In other words, unlike the RDA, the AI does not really tell us what percentage of individuals will meet the specified requirements. The UL is supposed to represent the highest level of daily nutrient intake that is likely to pose no risk of adverse health effects to most individuals in a population. If you don't fully get all the statistics mumble jumble, don't worry, it's not that important for most of us to understand. What's more important is that we understand how and why these statistical-based metrics result in differences between recommended and optimal doses. We'll get into that momentarily. In 2016, the IOM was replaced by the Health and Medicine Division, HMD. However, as of today, December 2019, the HMD has not yet issued any updates to the DRI for vitamin D. So let's look at the almost 10-year-old DRIs for vitamin D. The first thing we notice is that 600 IUs is recommended for everyone between the age of 1 and 70, regardless of gender or if pregnant or nursing. 400 IU is recommended for newborns up to 12 months old. This value is specified as AI, and I assume that's due to a lack of EAR data for that group, which would be needed to determine the statistically derived RDA. 800 IU is recommended for those over 70. The EAR is 400 IU for everyone older than 1 year old. The UL ranges from 1,000 IU for newborns to 4,000 IU for ages 9 and up. Okay, so now let's take a look at the history of DRIs for vitamin D in order to understand the controversy surrounding them. In 1991, the IOM published its first DRIs for vitamin D. Their recommendations were based upon maintaining a serum 25-OHD level above the level for which vitamin D deficiency, rickets, or osteomalacia would occur. Their 400 IU RDA was based on the premise that such a dose approximated what was in a teaspoon of cod liver oil, which had long been considered safe and effective in preventing rickets. Many researchers, such as Reinhold Weith, have argued that not only is that premise faulty and arbitrary, being based on a 19th century folk remedy, but moreover, it did not take into consideration many other vitamin D functions, including calcium metabolism and utilization, which impact cardiovascular health and other physiological systems. In 2010, the IOM published its most recent DRIs in which the RDA was revised up to 600 IU and their language was changed to reflect a concentration sufficient to maintain bone health and normal calcium metabolism in healthy people. The validity of even the revised RDA, however, has been called into question after a study published in the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research that same year looked at evidence obtained from the autopsies of people killed in car accidents. The researchers found that even those who reached the RDA failed to achieve the assumed 25-OHD level, and moreover 18 to 39% of them had osteomalacia, which is softening of the bones. The controversy continued when a study conducted by the School of Public Health at the University of Alberta and published by Nutrients in October 2014. The authors argued that the RDA for vitamin D was based on a statistical error. They stated the public health and clinical implications of this miscalculated RDA for vitamin D are serious. They recommended that the RDA for vitamin D be reconsidered to allow for appropriate public health and clinical decision making. Furthermore, they suggested that the current tolerable upper intake level, UL, is set so low as to impede substantial public health improvement in vitamin D status. A follow-up study published in November 2015 by Nutrients used the IOM's own criteria and concluded that the RDA should be in the multiple thousands and not 600 IU. The authors went on to state that the mere absence of clinical rickets can hardly be considered an adequate definition either of health or of vitamin D sufficiency. And yet, another study out of Boston University Medical Center concluded that the IOM recommendations for vitamin D failed in a major way on logic, on science, and on effective public health guidance. Moreover, failing to use a physiological referent, the IOM approach constitutes precisely the wrong model for development of nutritional policy. Wow. Now, statistics was not my best subject in college, so I'm not going to make any arguments that go above my pay grade. But having said that, I believe it's important to note that in determining DRIs, the IOM studies populations, not individuals, which means their recommendations are based on distribution curves and rely on concepts such as normal and average. But the question remains, how are those terms defined, and how relevant are they anyway? Some researchers, with a much better command of statistics than I have, suggest that a better standard for recommendations should be based on our historical natural levels, not merely the normal levels in today's modern times. After all, our bodies have evolved over millions of years. The target 25-OHD level of 30 only sounds high compared to average levels today because in modern times we lead unnatural lifestyles like working indoors or wearing clothes, in contrast to our counterparts on the earlier end of the evolutionary spectrum who walked around naked in tropical Africa getting full body sun exposure daily. The normal 25-OHD level from someone living during that period would be well in excess of 40. In fact, a study out of the University of Groningen in the Netherlands found that a normal level from a population living a more traditional lifestyle in East Africa had a mean 25-OHD serum level of 46. Of course, to determine if natural levels are or are not optimal, it would be important to study how varying 25-OHD serum levels relate to the incidence of disease. A 2015 study published in the Journal of Internal Medicine did exactly that and confirmed that the highest levels do correlate with less disease. Another interesting observation is that today, human breast milk in most nursing mothers contains virtually no vitamin D, which is why newborns are given vitamin D drops. However, in a study published in May 2015 edition of Annal of Internal Medicine, researchers demonstrated that mothers who had a vitamin D status of greater than 44.8, the natural level for traditional living humans, produced breast milk that fully met the vitamin D needs of their infants. All of these studies strongly suggest that the RDA and UL are woefully inadequate and that the 30-25 OHD serum level should probably be considered just the starting point, while the 46 level should be considered an optimal target level. I often joke that the RDA should really stand for recommended death allowance. When it comes to vitamin D, I personally find the DRIs, as well as the FDA's DV, which has adapted the EAR value of 400 IU, to be ridiculously conservative, outdated, and irrelevant. Particularly when there's a ton of research that suggests 5,000 IUs per day of cholecalciferol is optimum for those who did not get regular year-round full-body sun exposure, which is most of us. Other researchers, including Robert Barefoot, have suggested vitamin D3 doses as high as 30,000 IU per day. Most brands on the market contain 200 to 400 IUs of vitamin D per capsule. D-Max, which is NHS Global's vitamin D3 product, contains 5,000 IU, equal to 125 micrograms of vitamin D3 per capsule. Oh, and one last point I want to make about the IOM studies in vitamin D. They did not discern a difference between vitamin D2 or vitamin D3, which brings us to the next topic, toxicity. NHS Global has been producing D-Max, our vitamin D3 product, since 2003. D-Max is a 5,000 IU vitamin D3 product derived from lanolin and comes in a 250 count bottle. D-Max was formulated to be the perfect one-to-one complement to VK2, that's NHS Global's vitamin K2 product. D-Max can be taken by itself, but it's recommended to take 1 capsule of D-Max for each capsule of VK2. They should be taken together at the same time. For additional information, please visit vitamin-d-max.com or call toll-free 877-965-2140.